You know, growing up, there was a lot of people that talked a lot about tough, tough men and tough women that made it through hard times. There's a lot of different jobs that people said, you know, this is a tough job. This is something that a man handles, or a woman that is very tough and fierce that can handle. And you know, you would think of things like someone running a farm for a long time, or someone day in and day out waking up and doing a job their entire lives where things are not easy. For me, I always thought it was gruddy when, you know, on the baseball field. Something about gruddy baseball players I really liked. But there was one category of people that always kind of stood out no matter who you're talking to. And I think you might agree with me. And those people are called the Navy SEALs. These people are known to be the type of people that are just gruddy and salty and can get through a job and handle tough situations. And just recently I was watching an interview, a guy named Jocko Willink. He said, the athletic ability in the SEALs is the baseline. And from there, you need a lot more things to get through if you want to beat the training and be able to actually be a SEAL. He named a couple of those things, and one of them he said was leadership. You need to be able to have the type of leadership that gets you through hard challenges. Another one he said was tactical ability. You have to be able to develop a skill set to be able to bring some use to the table. But the one I want to really focus on today is he said, the will to finish a task no matter what. And you know, I think that really relates to our Christian lives as well. And that's what I want to take a look at today. Are we willing to finish a task no matter what happens? Are we willing to finish a task no matter the challenge we face, and no matter the amount of fears, and no matter the failures we've already been through? You know, that same guy told a story in his book called Extreme Ownership. And he starts it out by saying there was this war scene, basically. And it was a great big war fog in the middle of the Iraqi war, with Marines and SEALs all a part of this mission that they had to accomplish. And somewhere along the way, there was a lot of confusion that happened. Jocko was a leader for his SEAL team, and he wasn't actually on the grounds, but he was getting the communication from what was happening, and he was giving calls and orders as things were taking place. And what seemed to appear was that his SEAL team had got in some trouble. They were under massive attack from some of the Iraqi soldiers that were on the opposite side, or so they thought. And amongst this was also some of the military that had gone in to try to help out and do what they can to kind of resolve the situation. At some point along the way, Jocko lost contact with some of his SEALs. They couldn't regain contact with the guys, and he was getting calls in from the other military guys that were also a part of the mission. And there was a lot of confusion, so at some point he decided to go out on the field and actually try to investigate what was happening. And as he got out, he explains how he came to the commander of the Marine guys, and he's talking over the situation about how there's some enemy people in a building not far away, and there was a lot of fog, a lot of just fire going on, shots happening. And in the midst of all of that, he said something hit him that was he said it was kind of weird. Something wasn't right, something wasn't adding up. So he proceeded to ask this commander questions. He proceeded to do what he could to figure out more about the situation. And at some point, he got up behind this Humvee that they were crouched behind as enemy fire was taking place, or so they thought. And he took off towards this building that this commander's telling him there's enemies in. Now, you're probably thinking what I'm thinking. This guy's crazy. And that's exactly what he said the commander was thinking. He just kind of was like, what are you doing? Where are you going? And Jocko proceeded to go towards this building and literally just go in and bust the door down. And what he found on the other side was going to be something that would change the next 24 to 48 hours of his life. as he busted that door down, he saw some familiar faces, and that was the faces of his SEAL team. See, what had happened that day was something that the military, the SEALs, and everybody that knows anything about war dreads. It's called the blue on blue. It's where two groups that are on the same side of the military start firing at each other. A couple guys had been wounded at this point, and one guy had actually died from getting shot on in a blue on blue. Jocko, being the leader of this, knows this is a really bad situation, but they can't just leave. And so what he does in this situation, and maybe what we do as Christians oftentimes, defines who we are. What do we do when things get tough? Or what do we do when we know we're in the middle of a bad situation? What do we do when we know we're in the middle of a bad mistake? He looks at his guys, he decides who's been flustered enough, and he sends those guys home. He takes with him the guys that are a little bit more put together, and they go and they complete the mission. And upon returning to their base that day, he had received emails from high up military people that are not happy with him. And over the next 24 hours, he compiled evidence to say, this is exactly what happened, here's the mistakes we made, and try to pinpoint exactly what the real issue was to resolve the problem. Later, the next day, he would get into a meeting with his SEAL team, and he would stand up in front of all these guys that are counting on him and military leaders that could possibly look for a scapegoat to fire and possibly fire him from his job. And he had prepared a presentation, and he proceeded to talk about, this is the mistake we made here, here, and here. And he went through all these different things that was mistakes. And then he looked at the guys and he said, whose fault is this? And one SEAL guy raised his hand and he said, it's my fault because I made so-and-so mistake before we went out on the field. And he said, no, it's not your fault. And he said, whose fault is this? Another SEAL guy raises his hand and he says, it's my fault because while we were on the field, I made so-and-so mistake. And he said, no, it's not your fault. And he said a number of his guys were willing to raise their hand and say it was my fault. And at some point he stopped them and he said, this was my fault. I'm the leader. It's my responsibility. That guy's decision that day to own up to the fact that he had ultimate responsibility of the entire mission would change the course of the next couple of years of his life. The military would ultimately respect the fact that he was willing to accept and learn from his mistake and move forward. And that guy's a really well-known guy today in the SEAL teams. But the most important thing, guys, is that we learn that no matter what we've done, no matter what failure we're a part of, no matter what situation we're in, we're always willing to go to the next level. We're always willing to keep on pushing even though we've made mistakes. And today, our biblical story is about Abraham and a mistake that he made. You see, God called Abraham and Sarah to go from the place that they knew, to go from their hometown and to move to this place that God had promised them. Right? And in the midst of the war, there's a lot of unknowns. This Jocko guy also ended up saying how that blue on blue thing was a little bit more common than he had realized when it had happened in this type of war setting. See, the circumstances were not really in his favor, although there was mistakes. Although there was things he could have avoided. But guys, when God promises something, it is sure and it is true. And God had promised to Abraham that his descendants would be blessed. He had promised to Abraham that things would be good. He had promised to Abraham that ultimately that he had a plan. But Abraham's faith kind of shook at one point in his life. And we can find that it's in Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3. It says, Genesis 12, verses 11 through 13. It says, when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. Now guys, like I said, God had promised to Abraham that his descendants would be great. God had promised to Abraham that he had this inheritance for him in a land. But when things got tough, Abraham decided to try to trust his own skill set. He thought, well, maybe my life will be in jeopardy. And in the fear that came upon him in that moment made him make a decision that would ultimately kind of cost him probably some time and ultimately show that his trust in God in this situation wasn't great. So in life, guys, you have a choice. You can sit back and you can miss opportunities to live for your Creator, or you can take the journey without a faith that leads to true life and true happiness. But the problem is that along the road, there's gonna be road bumps. There's gonna be things that are gonna be hard to get over, hard to face. There's gonna be challenges that cause you to wanna take in your own strength and try to handle this myself. But ultimately, guys, it's that faith in God, that trust in God, that'll get us through the hard times, saying, no matter what, I can see the vision that I'm going in the direction that God's calling me. I'm not gonna take this into my own hands. I'm not gonna try to solve this issue. I know that God's gonna see me through this, and ultimately, He's gonna work for my good. You see, Abraham was counted in the book of Hebrews as one of the many guys or people, I should say, that stood up and were counted for their faith. It was credited to them as righteousness. And in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 through 10, it says, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. And here's the important part that I want to end on, guys. In verse 10 it says, for he was looking forward to the city that had foundations, whose designer and builder is God. You know, guys, we can choose to see what's in front of us. We can choose to see that we're in a situation that is not favorable to us. We can choose to see that we're stuck at home. We can choose to see that we're missing out on things that we had planned out for the summer or had planned out for this time at the end of the school year. Or we can choose to see that God is building a place for us to be one day, that God is a master designer and builder, and He is the one that ultimately has control in our lives, and we can choose to trust Him. So guys, when hard times, when fear, when a bad situation comes, I want you to know that you can always get over those things and continue to follow God. And those things may come along the way in your life. You know, this is a journey. Just like Abraham went on a journey, in our lives we're going to go on a journey. And we have to decide, am I willing to see the ultimate result? Am I willing to see the vision, the long run vision, no matter what happens? Am I willing to dedicate my life to Christ in a way that doesn't amount to the circumstances that I might face, doesn't hinge on the circumstances I might face in my life? I think if we do that, then no matter what comes our way, we'll be able to handle the challenges that we face. So like I said, just to wrap it up, you have a choice. You can choose to live for your Creator, and you can choose to trust His purposes and His plans for true happiness, or you can choose to miss out on those opportunities and always be seeking and searching. We all have a choice. It's up to us to choose.